Hey there, fellow LARPers, and welcome back. I'm Steven, your valiant vlogger, and this is where we take a careful, grounded look at what's actually moving right now in the worlds of live-action roleplay and immersive experience. This week isn't about shock announcements or surprise midnight drops. It's about windows, signals, and momentum. The quieter movements that tell you what's about to matter next. There are real registrations open, and there are important waitlists to get on. And there are several large projects clearly positioning themselves for the next wave. So let's get planning. First up, the Wayfinder Experience. It's confirmed that summer 2026 registration opens January 15th. If you're not familiar, Wayfinder is a combat-forward, narrative fantasy LARP program primarily focused on youth and teen players, with a structure that blends summer camp energy with heroic storytelling and cooperative play. The vibe here is energetic, supportive, and intentionally accessible. High adventure without the emotional weight of Nordic-style games. Wayfinder runs in multiple locations across the United States, and historically, their longer and overnight programs fill quickly. This is one of the first clearly dated registration openings of the year, which makes it an important early marker. Another item worth flagging this week comes from Grimmoire Productions. Lies and Liabilities, a Regency-era-based, social-forward, character-driven LARP, built around secrets, reputations, and the quiet weaponization of information, runs May 8th through 10th in Racine, Wisconsin. And tickets are available. The playstyle here is less about physical action and more about social maneuvering, legal entanglements, and interpersonal consequence. The kind of game where a conversation in the corner can matter more than anything else happening in the center of the room. The vibe is tense but playful, with a strong emphasis on long-term grudges, plausible deniability, and the slow unraveling of carefully maintained facades. This is very much a LARP ideal for players who enjoy intrigue and power dynamics. As of now, Lies and Liabilities still has some tickets left, which makes it notable in a week where many comparable games are already waitlist only. If you're looking for something smaller scale, socially intense, and sharply written, this is one to look at sooner rather than later. Something I've reported on before but deserves a second mention here is InConscience USA's waitlist is currently open. InConscience in the US is a fully immersive, site-based LARP set in an abandoned Old West-style town, complete with Western theming throughout the environment. Players are divided into distinct roles: androids who live inside the town's narrative loops and social structures, guests who arrive from the outside world with freedom of choice and consequence, and employees who maintain the park, enforce the rules, and mediate between the two. The experience draws direct inspiration from Westworld, if you haven't guessed already, and using the Western frontier aesthetic, saloons, streets, and period costuming to explore power, exploitation, labor, and moral responsibility. This is a physically realized town, designed for free movement, organic encounters, and long-form interaction over the course of the run. The tone is immersive and cinematic on the surface: gun belts, hospitality, roles, guest indulgence, while underneath, the game steadily pressures players to confront uncomfortable questions about agency, control, and complicity. The US edition takes place in Montana and is currently waitlist only, making this a get on the list and monitor movement situation rather than buy a ticket now immediately moment. If the idea of playing a visit to a Westworld-type LARP appeals to you, this is very much a game to pay attention to. Okay, I have 3 separate news pieces next, but all surrounding Dystopia Rising. So before we talk about individual chapter updates, it helps to understand what actually connects all these games. Dystopia Rising is a long-running post-apocalyptic campaign LARP set in a shared world that exists after a zombie apocalypse has already happened and failed to end humanity. Civilization didn't collapse overnight. It fractured, adapted, and kept going. In this world, the dead rise, resources are scarce, and survival is never guaranteed. But the real focus isn't just fighting monsters. It's what people build after everything breaks. Across every chapter, players portray survivors living in isolated settlements, trying to rebuild society while dealing with ongoing zombie threats, limited technology and medicine, political factions with competing ideologies, and moral compromises made in the name of survival. What makes something a Dystopia Rising game isn't just the setting, it's the mindset. Characters persist over years of play. Decisions then have long-term consequences. Alliances, betrayals, and leadership struggles carry forward from event to event. Each regional chapter represents a different settlement in the same broader world. They share the same history, rules, framework, tone, and apocalyptic logic, but develop their own cultures, power structures, and storylines based on player action. So when we talk about Dystopia Rising New York, Indiana, or the Anvil, we're not really talking about separate games. We're talking about different corners of the same ongoing apocalypse, viewed through different communities. With that context in place, let's talk about a few of those communities and what's happening therein. Dystopia Rising New York has its next major event on the calendar, the Filigree Gala, running January 30th through February 1st. Dystopia Rising New York has ongoing characters, faction play, survival mechanics, and a strong emphasis on community-driven storytelling. The vibe is gritty but social, a world where alliances matter just as much as combat skill. This event marks one of the first major campaign beats of the year for Dystopia Rising, which makes it a useful reference point even if you're not a player in that system. Dystopia Rising Indiana has published its full 2026 event calendar, beginning mid-January and running throughout the year. Like other Dystopia Rising chapters, this is a persistent campaign LARP, but as mentioned before, each chapter has its own community tone and regional flavor. Posting a full calendar is a strong behind-the-scenes signal. Venues are booked, staff is aligned, and ticket sales are likely to follow on a rolling basis. Even if registration isn't live yet, this is where players start doing their scheduling. The Pacific Northwest chapter, Dystopia Rising, the Anvil, has its calendar posted and is explicitly directing players to watch Discord for ticket sales announcements. Same post-apocalyptic campaign structure, but with a strong regional community identity. This is classic pre-drop posture. Dates are public, infrastructure is in place, and sales will open in controlled waves. So across multiple systems this week, we're seeing a shift away from vague coming soon language toward dated registration windows and published calendars. This isn't one event, it's a pattern. Historically, this is what the preseason phase looks like. Logistics locked, staff confirmed, venues secured, before public sales begin in earnest. If you're planning your year, this is the moment to stop waiting for announcements and start watching for specific dates. Now for around the globe news. InConscience currently has its sign-up window open through January 28th. What's InConscience? It's a Nordic-style blockbuster LARP built on the same Westworld-inspired framework as the original Conscience games, meaning some players take on the roles of androids bound by narrative loops and constraints, while others play guests, free to move, choose, and test the system. But this layers upon it a Three Musketeers-inspired fiction, blending swashbuckling adventure, honor, loyalty, and political intrigue with the unsettling power dynamics of the android guest divide. This particular edition is set in Cadiz, Spain. The tone is intense and cinematic, but also deliberately playful on the surface. Swordplay, period aesthetics, and social maneuvering, while quietly pushing players toward questions about agency, exploitation, and responsibility underneath. This is not a first-come ticket sale. It uses a lottery and casting process. And the important action right now is simply being part of that window before it closes on the 28th. If this combination, historical adventure on top of a Westworld-style ethical engine, sounds like your kind of thing, the decision point is now, not later. And I also know that I've commented on this before, but it bears mentioning again. Odysseus has publicly confirmed that crowdfunding will take place in early spring 2026, with first runs planned for autumn. Odysseus is a large-scale Nordic sci-fi LARP, think Battlestar Galactica. exploring isolation, exploration, and collective survival in a cinematic, design-forward format. It's set to run in Finland, and while this is not ticket sales yet, crowdfunding is effectively the front door. Updates, momentum, and access all start there. This is one of the clearest signals of where attention will shift later this year. As for immersive experiences, Masquerade, the immersive audience-moving reimagining of Phantom of the Opera on Off-Broadway in New York, has extended its run through March. This is immersive theater, not LARP. Guided audience movement, character interaction, and environmental storytelling. It's relevant because many LARP players look to experiences like this for inspiration, calibration, or simply adjacent play. At The Shed, also in New York City, a large contemporary arts venue focused on experimental and interdisciplinary work, an ARC opens as a mixed reality immersive experience. This blends physical space, technology, and guided participation, placing audiences inside a structured, perspective-shifting narrative. It's not LARP, but it sits very close to the same creative ecosystem. Now, before we move on, let's just wrap up what's open for registration quickly. Here are the experiences that are opening now. InConscience, lottery window is open until January 28th. Wayfinders, registration opens on January 15th. Dystopia Rising chapters have calendars posted. Oh, and there are still some open spaces left for Lies and Liabilities. All links are in the description of the video below. Feature time. It's that time of year again when we lift our head out of the snow, or sand I guess, and look around to see where we are. Because this time of year is actually one of the best moments to understand where LARP is headed, not just what's open right now. We're in that quiet stretch of calendar where public announcements slow down, but behind the scenes a lot is happening. Venues are being locked, staffing conversations are wrapping up, design teams are deciding what they're willing to commit to. And if you look at what worked last year, you can already see what 2026 is likely to reward. When we look back at the events that were widely talked about, well attended, or quickly filled out last year, a few patterns stand out. First, clarity. The games that did well weren't necessarily the newest or flashiest. They were the ones that were very clear about what they were offering. Fantasy school LARPs, like College of Wizardry, for example, didn't succeed because they were a surprise. They succeeded because players knew exactly what they were signing up for. Immersive environments, strong social play, and a school structure that rewards long-term character investment. Similarly, ethically driven LARPs in the conscious lineage continued to draw interest not because they softened their themes, but because they communicated them honestly. Players knew these were intense, emotionally demanding experiences, and opted in because of that, not despite of it. Another major success factor last year was intentional scale. We saw a lot of organizers resist the urge to grow bigger just because demand existed. Instead, they capped attendance at sizes they knew they could support, narratively, logistically, and emotionally. We saw this within the last years with projects that were clearly in demand, but where the organizers chose not to scale up because they knew the experience would break if they did. That decision paid off. Smaller or mid-sized runs often felt tighter, safer, and more satisfying, which in turn fueled strong word of mouth. Campaign systems like Dystopia Rising also benefited from this mindset. Their success didn't come from reinvention, but from consistency. Clear calendars, reliable event cadence, and communities that knew what kind of experience they were committing to month after month. And finally, last year rewarded projects that treated players like collaborators, not customers. In regards to this, continue to watch College of Wizardry and Dystopia Rising throughout 2026. Which brings us to where a lot of attention is heading next. New projects and why crowdfunding matters. One of the most important shifts we're seeing is how new, large-scale projects introduce themselves to the world. Instead of announcing ticket sales out of nowhere, more organizers are starting with crowdfunding, not just to raise money, but to test alignment. A project like Odysseus is a good example of this approach. Rather than saying, here are tickets, good luck, The team is saying, here's what we want to build, here's the scale we're aiming for, and here's what we need to do it well. That kind of transparency does two things at once. It gives players a chance to decide early whether the vision actually excites them, and it gives organizers a way to scope responsibly, adjusting ambition to reality instead of over-promising. And we saw that last year. The projects that succeeded using this model weren't always the ones that raised the most money. They were the ones that clearly communicated what kind of experience they were building and who it was for. Continue looking at projects like Odysseus, InConscience, and Grimmoire productions throughout 2026. It's also worth talking about when registrations tend to move, because this helps explain why things feel quiet right now. Most large LARPs don't open registration at random. Historically, we tend to see early signals, lotteries, and crowdfunding in late winter, major registration openings in spring, second runs and experimental games appearing in summer, and long horizon announcements in the fall. We're currently standing right at the start of that ramp, which means if you're waiting for big ticket drops today, you're probably going to feel a little impatient. But if you're paying attention to signals, calendars, postings, crowdfunding launches, save the dates, then you're actually right on time. Now a practical note, because this comes up all the time. People often ask, how do I keep track of all of this without living on social media? Well, the honest answer is you don't need to follow everything. You need to follow intentionally. Most organizers still communicate in a few predictable places: their official websites, their mailing lists, and their primary social channels, usually Instagram, Facebook, or Discord. If a game generally wants you to know something important, it will show up in more than one of those places. So instead of trying to watch everything, pick a short list, a handful of organizers you trust, a few projects you're genuinely interested in, and maybe one or two community news hubs. Check them occasionally. You don't have to refresh constantly. Oh, and maybe a YouTube channel or two that you like and subscribe to know when new vlogs drop. Like and subscribe. If something is truly time sensitive, you'll hear about it. Okay, so what does this mean for 2026? Let's put it all together. When we look ahead to 2026, the picture that's forming isn't chaotic, it's actually fairly coherent. We're likely to see established favorites returning with confidence, campaign systems continuing their steady rhythms, new projects launching more transparently, and fewer surprise drops but more clearly signposted ones. Well, that's a good thing. It means players get more agency, more time to decide, and a better chance to choose experiences that actually fit them. Okay, yes, this is a quieter moment in the calendar, but it's also one of the most informative ones if you know how to read it. The shape of 2026 is already there, in the kinds of projects being announced, in how organizers are communicating, and in what succeeded last year. Over the next few weeks, that shape will start turning into dates, windows, and real decisions. And that's when the year truly begins. Well, that's it for this week's Adventurers Dispatch. Links to official pages are in the description, as always, below. And if something here made you pause or reconsider your plans, well, that's a good sign. It means you're thinking ahead, not just reacting. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. It really helps me out. Next week, we'll be back with a whole new set of news and a deeper dive into the world of LARP. So until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and forward into your story.